Hey guys, tonight you find yourself on the rutted road before a medieval town at winter dusk, with cold stone walls rising like a sleeping beast. Damp straw clings to your boots, smoke gathers beneath the rafters of the gatehouse, and horse breath hangs pale in the air. A bell rings somewhere beyond the wall, slow and bronze, while river mist crawls up from the low fields and torchlight flickers along the battlements. Your cloak smells of wet wool. Your fingers are stiff around your walking stick, and yes, medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, not without luck, thick soles, and a stomach willing to negotiate with yesterday's pottage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand with the other late arrivals where the road narrows before the town gate. The sky is the colour of old pewter, and the last daylight lies thin across the muddy track. Around you, people huddle into themselves, a woman with smoked fish wrapped in cloth, two drovers smelling richly of sheep, and a pilgrim with a dented badge sewn to his hat. No one talks loudly. At this hour, voices seem to belong to the walls. The town has shut one half of its gate already. The remaining leaf of oak stands open just wide enough for honest people, suspicious people, and the many who are not sure which they are yet. Above it, a small painted saint watches from a niche, his face worn by rain. Some swear that if you tap the post beneath him with your left knuckle, he will keep toll collectors from noticing your purse, though none can quite agree whether the saint approves. You have come down from the ridge road after a day of frost, carrying a wool bundle, a wooden cup, and a heel of coarse bread wrapped in linen. The bread has gone hard enough to qualify as minor carpentry. In your pouch sit a few coins, enough, you hope, for a bed of rushes in an alehouse corner and a bowl of warm pottage. Your shoulders ache. Your feet pulse inside damp shoes. The thought of a hearth seems almost holy. Inside the gate, the town breathes out smoke, dung, baking rye, wet leather, and winter crowding. Narrow lanes run between timbered houses whose upper floors lean forward as if eager to gossip. Rushlights glow behind horn-paned windows. You join the shuffle toward the market toll table, where every basket, bale, and barrel must be named, weighed, or mistrusted. The toll clerk sits beneath a patched awning with a wax tablet, a horn ink pot, and the expression of a man disappointed by humanity since breakfast. Beside him, a guard warms his hands over a brazier. The woman with the smoked fish pays first. The drovers argue over a lame sheep, and the pilgrim receives a reduced toll after invoking St. Leonard, patron of prisoners and captives. Then it is your turn. You set your bundle on the table. It contains spare stockings, a small knife for bread, a patched hood, dried apple, and a folded scrap of cloth given to you by a woman at a roadside shrine who claimed it had touched a relic. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the relic was sacred, the cloth was sacred, or the woman was simply very persuasive. The clerk pokes through your belongings with 2 fingers and asks your business. You tell him you seek lodging, maybe work, maybe news of a cousin who entered service near the River Quay. It is the sort of answer that is true enough to be useful and vague enough to be dangerous. In a medieval town, maybe is sometimes more suspicious than a dagger. The clerk asks where you came from. You name a village 2 days back. The guard glances up. There has been trouble on that road, he says. A cart stopped before dawn, a broken wheel, a missing purse, a merchant swearing by all 12 apostles that someone with a blue hood walked away from the scene. Your hood, unfortunately, is blue. It is not even a fine blue. It is the dull blue of cloth dyed long ago and washed with more hope than skill. Still, it is blue enough for the clerk, blue enough for the guard, and blue enough for the market woman behind you to lean away as though colour itself might be catching. You explain that half the Shire owns blue hoods, because blue dye is not exactly dragon's blood. The guard does not smile. You produce your few coins, One is clipped at the edge, another is blackened from age or fire. The clerk asks how you came by them. You say you earned them carrying sacks at a mill, which is true. The part about the torn sack, the barley dust, and smelling like a barn for a week seems best kept private. By now the gate passage has grown colder. The last light drains from the sky. Torches hiss in iron brackets. The chapel bell inside town rings again, marking the hour when decent folk should be indoors and undecided folk become official problems. The market toll closes at dusk, and the clerk, perhaps tired, motions to the guard. Not prison. Not yet. That is what you tell yourself when the guard asks you to step aside. Just a question or two. Just a place to wait until the merchant is found, or the sergeant comes, or someone remembers that blue hoods are common enough to make accusation a fairly lazy craft. The guard is not cruel. He even lets you take your bundle, but his hand rests near the ring of iron keys at his belt, and the sound they make as he walks is small, cold, and final. You pass beneath the gatehouse arch and into the town's shadowed throat. Behind you, the road fades into mist. Ahead, beyond roofs and chimney smoke, the keep rises on its mound, square and dark against the winter sky. Its upper windows burn with pinpricks of yellow light. Somewhere up there, a watchman stamps his feet. Somewhere below, in a room you have not yet seen, straw lies damp on stone, and men count the hours by bells. For now, you walk slowly beside the guard through the narrowing lane. Your boots pull at the mud. A woman shutters her window. The dog from the gate follows, then thinks better of it and turns away, which feels unreasonably personal. The first night wind slips under your hood and touches the back of your neck like a warning finger. You hold your bundle close, smell the wet wool of your cloak, and listen as the town gate groans shut behind you. You follow the guard through the lane while the last sound of the closing gate rolls behind you like a wooden thunderclap. The town seems to fold inward after dusk. Shopboards are pulled down, shutters are barred, and the thin smell of supper leaks from houses whose doors are already fastened against night. Weather, beggars, wolves, taxmen, and any neighbour with a long memory. The guard does not hurry, which somehow makes the walk feel longer. His boots know every rut. Yours find every puddle. Ahead, the gatehouse opens into a square chamber beneath the wall, low-roofed, smoky, and full of that sour warmth made by men, damp wool, old rushes, and a brazier that is doing its very best under difficult professional circumstances. The portcullis hangs above the inner arch like the teeth of a giant comb. Its iron points catch the torchlight. A chain runs up through a blackened slot in the ceiling, and somewhere overhead, unseen. Wood creaks as the wind presses against the wall walk. The guard gestures you inside. You duck beneath the arch because everyone ducks beneath arches in old stone buildings, even when there is room enough, simply because the stones look as if they remember taller people. A second guard sits on a bench with his cloak wrapped around him and a bowl of something steaming between his knees. It smells of onions, beans, and resignation. He looks up, sees your blue hood, and makes the sort of face a man makes when supper has been interrupted by paperwork. The first guard explains the matter in a low voice road from the ridge. Merchant's purse, broken cartwheel, blue hood, questionable coins. You stand nearby with your bundle in both hands, trying to look harmless. This is harder than it should be. In a medieval gatehouse, even breathing can seem like a legal position. A clerk appears from a side room with an ink-stained thumb, a narrow beard, and a wax tablet tucked beneath one arm. His belt carries a small knife for trimming quills, a purse for sand, and a little bone stylus polished by constant use. He asks your name. You give it. He scratches it into wax, then asks it again, as if names, like fish, might wriggle into another shape if held loosely. No one can quite agree whether a name spoken at night has more weight than one spoken in daylight. But the old women in some villages still warn children not to give their full names after sunset unless they trust the door they stand beneath. You answer carefully. You tell him your village, your errand, your hope of finding lodging. You mention the cousin near the quay. The clerk asks the cousin's trade. You're not sure. He raises one eyebrow. You add that the cousin may work with barrels, rope, or fish, which does not improve things. In a river town, this describes half the people and the smell of the other half. The sleepy sergeant is sent for. While you wait, the gatehouse settles around you. The brazier pops softly. Outside, beyond the portcullis, the lane darkens to brown and black. A horse stamps in the outer yard, and from above comes the slow tread of a watchman crossing the wall. The guard with the bowl eats with a wooden spoon, blowing on each mouthful, and you remember the hard bread in your bundle with a tenderness usually reserved for saints and lost relatives. Rushes cover part of the stone floor, though they have been walked into a flattened mat. In better halls, rushes might be changed often and strewn with sweet herbs like lavender, meadowsweet, or dried mint. Here, they have accepted their fate. Someone has thrown rosemary near the hearth, perhaps to improve the air or to keep away illness, or because rosemary, like hope, is cheap in small handfuls. Some swear that rosemary under a bench prevents quarrels. Looking at the guards, you suspect it has limits. The clerk sits at a narrow table and warms the end of his stylus between his fingers. He asks about your coins again. The clipped one troubles him. Coin clipping is a serious matter, a quiet theft from king, lord, and market trust. You explain that a miller paid you with it. The clerk asks which miller. You name him. The clerk asks whether the miller is an honest man. You pause too long, because honesty and millers have always had a complicated arrangement. The guard with the spoon snorts into his bowl. A bell rings from within the town, then another from farther off. Perhaps the chapel of the keep or the house of friars near the river. The sound spreads through the stone chamber and seems to hang in the smoke. Bells divide the night for everyone monks at prayer. Bakers waking before dawn. Guards counting watches. Prisoners counting breaths. You think of the painted saint over the gate and wonder if you should have tapped the post after all. Perhaps with both knuckles. Perhaps with your head. At last the sergeant arrives, fastening his belt as he comes, his hair flattened on one side from sleep. He is not old, but he carries himself with the weary patience of a man who has heard every explanation the county can produce. His cloak is fur-lined at the collar, worn thin where his chin rubs against it. A small charm of iron hangs at his neck, shaped like a bent nail. Some guards carry such things to turn aside ill luck, especially in doorways and prisons, where people believe anger, sickness, and restless spirits gather like cold air. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm protects the sergeant from misfortune or merely gives him something to touch when clerks begin talking. He listens while the guard explains again. The clerk adds your answers. The second guard contributes nothing except chewing. The sergeant looks at your hood, your boots, your bundle, your face. His gaze is not unkind, but it has no spare warmth to offer. He asks whether you resisted. The first guard says no. He asks whether you carried a weapon. The guard shows him your small bread knife, which suddenly looks guilty lying on the table, though it has never harmed anything tougher than cheese. The sergeant rubs his eyes and sighs. The merchant who made the complaint is lodging near the bridge, he says, and cannot be brought in until morning without waking half the ward and the alderman, who sleeps badly and fines loudly. You will be held until first light, not in the deepest room, not in irons unless you become foolish, not in the outer hall where you might wander off and become the sergeant's personal disappointment. For a moment, relief and dread arrive together. Held until morning is better than condemned, better than beaten, better than vanished into some pit from a minstrel's darker verse. But morning is many bells away. The night outside presses against the gatehouse. The keep waits uphill, lanterns burning in slits of stone. The clerk takes your name once more, your village, your bundle, your coins. The bread knife is placed aside to be kept for you, if all is well, which is a phrase built almost entirely from fog. Your bundle is returned after the guard shakes it out. One spare stocking falls onto the rushes with tragic dignity. No one laughs except the guard with the spoon, and even he does it quietly. Then the sergeant nods toward the inner yard. "Common cell," he says. The first guard lifts his keys. They hang from a thick iron ring, large and dark, each one shaped for a different oak door, chest, hatch, or stubborn little lock somewhere in the keep. As he moves, they strike together with a dry, patient music. You gather your bundle, pull your blue hood closer, and step toward the arch beneath the hanging portcullis, leaving the brazier's weak warmth behind. Outside, the yard opens under a sky without stars. The keep rises ahead, broader now, smelling of rain, smoke, horse dung and old stone, somewhere behind you. The dog from the gate has returned after all. It stands near the threshold, watching with bright eyes, as if curious to see whether this is how all travellers are lodged in town. The yard receives you with a thin wash of wind. It slips over the wall, under your hood, and straight through the seams of your sleeves, as if the night itself has been hired to search you. The guard walks ahead with his ring of keys at his hip, and each step makes them click and answer one another in small iron voices. Behind you, the dog pads only as far as the gatehouse threshold, then sits, choosing observation over loyalty. Medieval dogs are wise that way. They know when a journey has become someone else's problem. You cross the outer yard slowly. It is not large, but darkness makes every distance longer. To your left stand the stables, low and warm-smelling, with horse breath clouding through the cracks. A groom lifts a lantern and watches you pass, his hands dark with grease from a harness strap. To your right, a cart leans near the wall with one wheel propped on blocks, and the sight of it gives you an unpleasant little turn, because broken wheels seem to be following your evening like a bad rhyme. Beyond the yard, the keep door waits under a shallow porch. It is oak, iron-banded, and older than several people who look confident giving orders. A small horseshoe is nailed above the lintel, open end upward to hold luck, or open end downward to pour luck upon those entering. No one can quite agree whether one way saves fortune or spills it, and so every village argues with the next while misfortune, patient as ever, steps in either direction. The guard touches the horseshoe with 2 fingers before he knocks. From somewhere higher in the keep, a chapel bell sounds the hour after sunset. The note drops through stone, down stairwells and passages, into the yard where the mud shines black. At the bell, the guard pauses. So does the groom. Even the horse behind the stable door seems to still. The sound is worn and local, a bell with a crack in its throat, but it has authority. It tells bakers when to cover their dough, monks when to rise for prayer, watchmen when to change places, and prisoners when another little portion of night has been spent without asking their permission. The door opens inward. Warmth does not come out. Exactly. But the air changes. It grows thicker with smoke, beeswax, damp wool, and old rushes. You step across the threshold and into a low entrance hall where soot gathers along the rafters like black moss. A boy with a broom pushes dirty rushes into a heap near the wall. Fresh rushes, bundled with dried thyme, wait beside him. In grand houses, such strewing might make a hall sweet for guests. Here, the time fights a long war it is unlikely to win. Still, for one breath, the place smells almost of summer. A monk stands near the inner doorway, his brown robe dark at the hem from the yard. He's speaking quietly with a servant who holds a tray of beeswax candle stubs, each saved to be melted down again. Wax is too dear to waste, even when prayers are involved. The monk's face is narrow, and his eyes flick toward your blue hood with professional concern. Perhaps he serves the chapel. Perhaps he comes to bring comfort to the held and the condemned. Perhaps, as the guard mutters, he comes because he enjoys knowing everyone sins before breakfast. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about monks in prisons. Some are gentle as warmed milk, and some collect secrets the way children collect feathers. You lower your eyes politely as you pass. The monk lifts 2 fingers in blessing. It is brief, but not careless. You're surprised by how much you want it to mean something. The guard leads you toward a side passage cut into the thickness of the keep. The stones narrow, the ceiling lowers. The candle in his hand is already half burned, its flame bending whenever the draught finds a crack. The keys swing beside it, throwing quick shadows that look like thin black birds. You hear voices now, not clearly, but gathered somewhere ahead, coughs, a low murmur, the scrape of a shoe, the soft thump of someone shifting against a wall. At a small table in the passage sits another man, older, with a wool cap pulled down over his ears. He keeps a tally stick beside him, notched for loaves, cups of ale, bundles, bodies, and all the little things that must be counted before they become arguments. He asks the guard who you are. The guard gives your name, your village, and the charge as if reciting a weather report: blue hood, road purse, morning inquiry. The old man nods and makes a mark. You notice an onion hanging from a peg above his table, pierced with cloves. You glance at it despite yourself. The old man sees you looking and says it keeps foul air from settling in the throat. Some swear that onions draw sickness out of a room if left near a bed or door. Others swear onions draw nothing but flies and poor conversation. In a prison passage, you think, every remedy deserves a chance. The passage turns. A tiny chapel alcove opens in the wall, no bigger than a cupboard, lit by one beeswax taper before a painted image of St. Leonard with broken chains in his hands. Pilgrim badges, scraps of thread, and 2 bent pins lie on the ledge beneath him. Someone has left a crust of bread there too, which seems either pious or practical. The guard crosses himself. So do you, because this is not a moment to appear selective about assistance. A prisoner behind a nearby door whispers a prayer when the bell's last vibration fades. Another voice answers with a charm against false witness, muttered so fast it becomes more breath than words. The old man at the table tells them to be still. They are still for the length of a sigh, then begin again more softly. Night has its own rules, and even authority grows tired of enforcing silence against fear. You are led past 2 closed doors. The first smells of wet straw and iron. The second has a little hatch set into it, with scratches around the latch where many hands have tested old hope. A draught runs along the floor, carrying the chill of deeper stone. Somewhere water drips into a bucket with patient regularity. The guard stops before a third door. It is thick oak, darker at the bottom where damp has climbed it year after year. He sets the candle on a bracket, lifts the keyring, and chooses one key by feel. The lock receives it with a reluctant scrape. For a moment, before the door opens, you stand in the narrow passage listening to the bell's memory. The murmur of prayers, the old man's quill scratching, the monk's sandals fading away, and the keys at your side settling into silence. Then the door gives, and the first breath of the common cell comes out to meet you. The common cell breathes out slowly, as if the room itself has been holding a long, damp sigh. You step over the threshold, and the first thing you know is the smell straw gone sour at the edges, wet wool, old smoke trapped in cloth, unwashed bodies, cold stone, and beneath it all the faint earthy scent of the rushes someone has scattered near the door, in a hopeful little gesture toward civilization. The guard lifts his candle higher, and the flame opens the room by pieces. It is not a pit, not the deepest place under the keep, not the black hole sung about by frightened children and inventive grandmothers. It is a stone chamber with a low ceiling, a narrow slit high in the wall, and enough space for men to sleep badly without quite lying on one another. Along the walls, straw has been piled in uneven nests. 2 wool blankets hang from pegs, stiff with age and damp. A wooden bucket sits in the corner beneath the window slit. No one looks proud of it. The prisoners turn their faces toward you. There are 5 of them, perhaps 6 if the shape beneath the far blanket is a person, and not simply a heap of regret. One is a broad-shouldered carter, with mud dried to the knees of his hose. One is an old man with a white beard yellowed near the mouth. One is a thin apprentice in a patched tunic, his hands ink-stained as though he has recently escaped a scribe's desk and not very successfully. Near the wall sits a woman wrapped in a grey cloak, her hair hidden under a linen coif, watching the candle without blinking. At her feet lies a bundle tied with cord, guarded more carefully than a noble's chest. The guard says your name, or something close to it, then says you are for morning inquiry. The phrase lands in the room with mild interest. Morning inquiry is neither a hanging nor a feast. It is weather. It may pass. It may soak you through. Blue hood, the guard adds, because apparently your hood has become a legal document. The carter snorts softly. Half the town wears blue. The guard looks at him. The carter becomes very interested in the straw. You are nudged inside. The door remains open just long enough for the candlelight to show the floor flagstones worn hollow in places. Rushes darker where water has seeped up through cracks, and bits of old straw kicked into small ridges by restless feet. In manor halls, servants sweep rushes aside each morning with brooms of birch twigs, gathering bones, crumbs, dropped pins, and all the little evidence of life. Here, the floor is swept when someone remembers, or when the smell becomes an argument. Medieval cleanliness, you discover, is often a matter of negotiation. The guard points to a space along the right wall. There. You go there. You sit. The stone reaches through your cloak at once. Cold does not hurry in a prison. It has all night. You pull your bundle into your lap and keep one hand on the knot. Not because anyone has threatened you, but because every person in the room has looked at the bundle once, and bundles are small private kingdoms. You defend yours with a tired dignity. The door shuts. The key turns. The sound is not loud, but it changes the air. The guard's footsteps retreat down the passage, iron keys tapping time against his thigh. For a little while everyone listens to him go. Then, as if released from a spell, the room resumes its murmurs. The carter asks where you come from. You tell him. The old man asks whether the road bridge is still broken near the mill. You say it is, and that travellers now cross by the alder stump. The apprentice says he fell there last spring and lost a shoe. The woman in the grey cloak says nothing, but her eyes shift toward your bundle, then away. You realise these little exchanges are not friendliness exactly. They are measurements, place, speech, clothing, coin, smell of trade, strength of hands, likelihood of trouble. In the common cell, people read one another the way monks read parchment slowly, carefully, because mistakes can cost warmth. The carter gives the first rule without calling it a rule. Keep your feet out of the middle when men rise. The apprentice adds, do not drink from another man's cup unless he gives it. The old man says, do not speak of your case too fully after midnight. Words wander then. No one laughs. Some swear that accusations spoken in darkness find ears among devils, informers, or simply men desperate enough to sell a sentence for a crust. No one can quite agree whether words truly wander, but in this room every whisper seems able to slip beneath the door. You nod. These rules feel sensible, especially the one about feet. The carter shifts aside a little, granting you more straw. It is damp underneath but dry on top. A small mercy. You loosen your cloak and tuck its edge beneath your hip. The wool smells of rain and road smoke. Somewhere in the far corner, the blanket-shaped heap coughs, proves human, and settles again. The old man draws something from his sleeve, a little twist of thread knotted around a crumb of dried herb. He presses it beneath his tongue, closes his eyes, and breathes through his nose. For the lungs. The apprentice whispers, what herb depends who sold it. That is the trouble with medieval remedies. Coltsfoot, horehound, sage, honey, onion, garlic, vinegar, blessed water, and words written on scraps all promise to help if taken with faith, timing, or enough desperation. The old man opens one eye and says the charm was made by a widow who cured 3 coughs, 1 fever, and a goat. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the goat was cured or merely became too embarrassed to die. A soft ripple of amusement moves through the straw. It does not become laughter. Laughter is too warm a thing to spend quickly in a place like this. You lean back against the wall. Above you, the window slit shows no sky, only blackness pressed thin between two stones. The room grows dimmer now that the guard's candle has gone. A small rushlight burns near the door, set in a lump of clay, its flame weak and smoky. It trembles whenever a draught slides under the threshold. The shadows of knees, bundles, and bowed heads stretch and shrink across the wall. The woman in the grey cloak finally speaks. Her voice is low. If you have bread, keep it wrapped. You glance down at your bundle. Rats, you ask. Rats, men, and hunger, she says, in that order, unless the men are hungry. You take the warning as kindly meant. Carefully, you untie your bundle, break a small piece from your hard bread, and chew it slowly. It tastes of rye, smoke, and the heroic determination not to be eaten. The carter watches, then looks away. You break another smaller piece and offer it to him. He hesitates, accepts, and nods once. A treaty is made, not friendship, not trust, but enough for a winter night behind an oak door. Somewhere beyond the cell, a bell rings again, softened by stone. The sound reaches you as a low bronze murmur. You sit among strangers, damp straw under your hand, blue hood folded beside you, wool cloak pulled tight, and you begin to learn the quiet shape of prison. After dark, not screams, not constant terror, but waiting, listening, breathing shallowly, guarding small things, and measuring the night one distant bell at a time. The bell's last murmur fades into the wall, and for a while the cell settles into quiet that is not silence at all. Straw shifts beneath knees. Someone breathes through a blocked nose. The old man with the herb charm clicks his tongue against his teeth. Water taps into the bucket near the window slit, each drop steady enough to become a thought you cannot put down. Then, from the passage outside comes the scrape of a stool and the unmistakable smell of supper. Every head turns toward the hatch. It is a narrow square cut into the oak door, closed with a sliding board and a bolt polished by many hands. Earlier you noticed the scratches around it, thin pale lines where fingernails, knife tips, and hope have tried their luck. Now the bolt lifts, the hatch opens, and warm air enters first, rich with barley, onion, ale, smoke, and something faintly fishy that may be seasoning or apology. A face appears beyond the hatch, round, red, and bored, belonging to a servant from the lower kitchen. He carries a wooden tray with the horn cups and a pot crusted thick with pottage. The guard's candle glows, that same half-burned flame from the passage, smaller but stubborn. Supper, the servant says, as if announcing a royal feast that has suffered a terrible accident. The carter rises first, remembering his own rule and keeping his feet out of the middle. The apprentice shifts aside. You stay seated until the woman in the grey cloak nods toward the door, which appears to mean you may take your share without stepping on anyone important. In prison, manners are not softer than outside, they are sharper. One by one, wooden bowls are pushed through the hatch. The pottage is thick, grey-brown, and steaming. It has barley, leek, a few beans, and perhaps turnip from some winter storehouse. A heel of coarse bread follows each bowl, not large, not fresh, but blessed by the fact that it is not imaginary. The ale comes last, thin and small, poured into shared horn cups that smell of sour drink. You take your bowl in both hands. Heat seeps into your fingers, and for a moment the world narrows to that mercy. Your stomach remembers it has been neglected and expresses a view. You dip the bread, let it soften, and eat slowly because food eaten too quickly in a cold room leaves the body confused. The pottage tastes of smoke, salt, and vegetables that have seen better fields. It is wonderful. The man murmurs a blessing over his bowl, adding St. Leonard for prisoners, St. Bridget for the hearth, and St. Anthony for lost things, because he says justice misplaces itself often enough to qualify. Some swear that bread marked with a cross before eating cannot choke a truthful man. The carter scratches a cross into his heel with his thumbnail and says he hopes Truth is not too particular about table manners. From beyond the hatch, voices move in the passage. The servant lingers, because supper delivery is also news delivery, and news, like fleas, prefers crowded places. He says the merchant from the bridge has been awake, making noise over his missing purse. He claims the thief wore a blue hood and walked with a limp. Everyone looks at your feet. You stop chewing. I do not limp, you say. You did when you came in. The apprentice says, my shoes are wet. The carter nods gravely. Wet shoes have condemned better men. It is not much of a joke, but it warms the room by a finger's breadth. The servant adds that the merchant cannot agree whether the hood was blue, green, or darkish, which in torchlight describes nearly everything except a swan. No one can quite agree whether witnesses become clearer by morning or merely more confident. The woman in the grey cloak unwraps her own bread and says confidence is cheaper than candles. More rumour follows with the ale. A tinker is held below for selling false buckles at market. A shepherd paid his fine with 3 fleeces and a promise nobody expects him to keep. A washerwoman near the quay swears she saw a man toss something into the river, and the servant says washerwomen see all things because linen carries secrets better than parchment. The carter says both are easier to trust than a merchant who cannot name a colour. You listen while eating, and the cell feels less like a sealed box than a knot tied into the town's larger rope. Outside these stones, bakers bank ovens, friars chant in their chapel, alewives chalk debts by rushlight, and somewhere the suspicious monk perhaps warms his hands. Inside, you receive the same world through a hatch food, rumour, judgment, smell, and steam. The servant asks whether anyone has coin for extra bread. No one answers at first. Then the apprentice produces a bent pin and offers it with tragic hope. Bent pins fasten sleeves, mend hems, and serve as tiny offerings at saints' shrines. But they do not buy bread from kitchen boys who have seen enough poverty to bargain without poetry. You think of the clipped coin taken at the gatehouse, the bread knife kept aside if all is well, and the hard piece still wrapped in your bundle. You do not bring it out. Hunger makes eyes quick. Instead, you scrape the last of the pottage from your bowl with your bread and let the warmth settle behind your ribs. The hatch closes, the bolt falls, supper leaves its steam behind, and the room returns to dimness, stirred by the merchant's changing tale, blue, green, darkish, limping, not limping, purse, cartwheel, morning inquiry. Rumour has crossed the keep faster than any clerk, faster than the jailer's keys, faster than justice climbing from bed. You lean back against the cold wall and hold the empty bowl until the heat is gone. Outside, the passage quiets. Inside, each prisoner tends a private thought. The woman ties her bundle. The carter licks salt from his thumb. The old man whispers another saint's name. And you listen to your breathing, steadying it with the distant bell, while the night thickens around the common cell like wool soaked in rain. The bowl cools in your hands until it is no warmer than the stone behind your shoulders. One by one, the prisoners surrender their empty dishes to the dark beside them, each wooden scrape sounding larger than it should. The common cell has eaten, and now it returns to the older work of night waiting, smelling of wet wool, and listening for whatever walks beyond the door. At first, you hear only the keep settling. A beam clicks overhead. Wind noses along the window slit, somewhere in the yard. A horse stamps, then blows a long breath into the cold. The old man's herb charm has made his coughing softer, or perhaps he's simply too tired to argue with his lungs. The carter folds his arms beneath his head and lies back on straw, with the dignity of a man pretending flagstones are a feather-bed. Medieval comfort, you decide, is mostly a talent for lying to oneself. Then the keys begin. They sound far down the passage, a faint clink and drag, then silence, then clink again. Every face turns toward the door, though no one rises. The jailer is making his rounds. You know this before anyone says it, because the room changes like a village lane when the Lord Steward appears not panic, not welcome, but a quick inward tidying of faces. Light touches the lower edge of the door. A tallow candle, not beeswax now, burns beyond it with a greasier smell, sheep fat and smoke. Tallow is cheaper, dimmer, and more loyal to soot than to brightness. Through the hatch cracks, the flame wavers. Footsteps stop outside the first door down the passage. A bolt lifts. A man mutters. The jailer answers in a voice roughened by cold ale and habit. You picture him from the sounds before you see him: heavy shoes, wool cloak, keys on an iron ring, perhaps a cudgel tucked under one arm, not raised, merely present like bad weather. The apprentice whispers that he counts heads after supper and before midnight, to make sure no one has turned into a hole in the wall. The woman in the grey cloak says men who count badly should not be given keys. The carter breathes a laugh into his sleeve. No one can quite agree whether this jailer is kinder than the last. Some say he lets poor men keep their blankets if their wives beg politely. Others say he charges for straw as if straw were velvet from Lucca. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about officers of locked rooms. One prisoner remembers mercy, another remembers a fee. The footsteps come nearer. Your hatch slides open with a sharp wooden cough. Candlelight falls across the cell, yellow and low, making every eye shine. The jailer peers in. He's shorter than you imagined, broad through the neck, with a cap pulled low and a beard trimmed unevenly by a blade that has known disappointment. Around his wrist is tied a red thread knotted 3 times. Against fever, the old man later says. Against prison ghosts, the apprentice claims. Against his wife, noticing he lost the first thread, the carter murmurs. The jailer counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. His lips move with each number. He looks at the heap in the far corner until it raises a hand to prove citizenship among the living. Satisfied. He pushes a clay cup through the hatch for the bucket corner and tells the carter to keep the straw away from the rushlight. Straw fires, he says, are troublesome. This seems a modest description, like calling the Black Death an inconvenience. He asks who has fever. No one answers quickly. Fever can bring a monk, a leech, vinegar cloths, or removal to a worse room, depending on the season, purse, and temper of everyone involved. The old man admits to a cough. The jailer tells him to chew sage if he has any, and if not, to pray near someone who does. It is not learned medicine, perhaps, but it is the sort of advice medieval people survive on when physicians are far away and costly enough to make sickness consider retreat. He turns his candle toward you. Blue hood, he says. You lift your chin. Wet shoes. You answer, because this has somehow become your legal defense. The jailer studies you. His eyes pause on your hands, your bundle, your folded hood, and the place where your bread knife is not. He asks whether you know the merchant at the bridge. You say no. He asks whether you passed a broken cart. You say you passed 3. Because winter roads are ambitious mud with a grudge. The carter mutters approval. The jailer does not. But neither does he call you liar. He only says morning will sort it. Which sounds less like confidence than a way to postpone thinking. Before he closes the hatch, he taps the doorframe with the back of one key. Once, twice, 3 times. The old man crosses himself. You glance at him, and he whispers that some jailers tap oak to wake the wood, so it remembers to hold. Others say the tapping confuses spirits who slip through hinges. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the jailer believes any of it, or whether a man who spends his nights among locks simply grows fond of rituals that answer him back. The hatch shuts. His keys move on. Door by door, the same small ceremony continues. Bolt, candle, count, warning, mutter, lock. You hear a prisoner below complain of lice. The jailer advises him to bargain with them, since they have tenure. Somewhere farther on, a woman asks for more straw and receives silence shaped exactly like no. When the footsteps fade, the cell exhales. The rushlight has burned lower. Shadows regain the corners. You tuck your bundle beneath your head, though it makes a poor pillow and smells of apple and road dust. The red thread, the tapping key, the tallow smoke, The count of 6, all of it, settles into you. This, you understand, is the work of the prison at night, repeated proofs that the door remains closed, the names remain counted, and mourning is kept beyond many locks. The jailer's footsteps fade until the passage gives back only the small breathing of the keep. For a little while after his round, no one speaks. The door has been counted, the straw warned, the bucket corner acknowledged, and the common cell returns to the soft, uneasy kingdom of prisoners after supper. The rushlight near the door gutters in its clay lump, thin as a tired firefly, and the smoke from it climbs the wall in a wavering black thread. You lie with your bundle under your head, though it has too many knots to deserve the name of pillow. The hard bread inside presses against your ear like a private accusation. Around you, bodies settle by degrees. The carter turns once, then again, searching for the least unfriendly stone beneath the straw. The apprentice rubs his ink-stained fingers together, perhaps from cold, perhaps from habit. The old man with the cough breathes through his mouth, lips moving around words too small to hear. Then the prayers begin. They do not begin as one grand murmur, not like monks in choir or villagers gathered before a painted rood. They begin separately, each person turning inward, each voice tucked close to the chest. The old man whispers to Saint Blaise for his throat, because people say that saint knows the narrow troubles of choking, coughing, and bones lodged where bones should not lodge. The apprentice whispers to Saint Nicholas, patron of scholars, clerks, boys, travellers, and apparently anyone who has made a poor decision near a wax tablet. The carter names St. Eligius for horses and metalwork, then adds St. Christopher for safe passage, though he is not going anywhere tonight except deeper into his own straw. The woman in the grey cloak lifts something from beneath her collar. In the dim light, you see a small pilgrim badge, dull pewter, shaped like crossed keys. She touches it once to her lips, once to her forehead, then hides it again. Such badges come from shrines, fairs, abbeys, and holy roads, bought for a coin or earned by sore feet. Some swear that a badge from the right shrine can turn aside sickness, bad judgment, or a hanging rope. Others say it mostly proves you walked a long way and paid the seller. Even now, it is hard to tell whether holiness clings to metal or whether tired people simply need something cool and solid to hold. You find yourself reaching for the scrap of cloth in your bundle, the one given to you near the roadside shrine, the one that may have touched a relic or may have touched a persuasive widow's sleeve. You do not take it out fully. You only press it through the linen wrap with your thumb. It feels foolish. It also feels better than doing nothing. Medieval faith, you are learning, has room for both. The old man notices. Relic cloth, perhaps. Best kind, he murmurs. The uncertain ones cannot disappoint you properly. That almost makes you smile. You hear it in the dark more than feel it on your face. The prayers thicken, then loosen into talk. Night talk is different from day talk. It comes in threads, not speeches. The apprentice says a black hen crossed the market square backward that morning, and that nothing good follows a backward hen. The carter says hens have enough trouble walking forward with dignity. The apprentice insists his grandmother knew signs a candle that burns blue means a spirit is near. A dog howling at an empty corner means death. A dropped knife means a stranger comes hungry. The carter asks what it means when a man drops his bowl of pottage. It means he goes hungry. The woman says, "No one can quite agree whether omens warn of fate or merely give people something to blame afterward. Still, every person listens. In a room where the law is sleeping elsewhere, signs feel busier than officials." The old man produces another remedy from his sleeve, this one wrapped in a scrap of linen. He has, it seems, the stores of a small apothecary hidden in his clothing, dried sage, a pinch of horehound, and a sliver of garlic appear in his palm. He says garlic under the tongue warms the blood and discourages worms, fever, evil breath, and unwanted conversation. The apprentice asks if it discourages judges. The old man says nothing, discourages judges except dinner. He offers the sage around. The carter refuses. The woman takes a leaf and tucks it near her gum. The apprentice sniffs it and sneezes so sharply that the shape under the far blanket wakes and curses without opening his eyes. You take a small piece because the cell is cold, and because refusing a shared remedy feels rude, as if someone has passed you a cup at a hearth. It tastes bitter, dusty, and green, like chewing the memory of a garden. The room grows calmer after that. Prayer, rumour, and herbs do their work, not by changing the stones, but by giving the mind little tasks. Touch the badge, name the saint, chew the leaf, cross the bread. Avoid speaking your whole fear aloud. These are small customs, but small customs are how people build rails along the edge of darkness. From somewhere in the keep, a door closes. Farther away, a bell gives a half-hearted note, not a full hour. Perhaps a sacristan shifting rope, or a sleepy servant knocking metal by accident. The sound travels down through the wall and rests in the cell. You remember the cracked bell above the chapel, the suspicious monk's lifted fingers, the horseshoe over the keep door, the jailer tapping oak 3 times so the wood remembers to hold. The whole world outside seems made of gestures meant to persuade unseen things, saints, spirits, sickness, luck, hunger, fear. You lie back again. The rushlight sinks lower, blue at its root and gold at its tip. The woman in grey begins a psalm under her breath. The old man joins for 3 lines, loses the words, and hums the rest. The carter's breathing deepens. The apprentice still watches the door, counting perhaps, or praying without moving his lips. You do not know whether morning will clear your name. You do not know whether the merchant will remember blue, green, or darkish. You do not know whether the clipped coin will become trouble of its own. But for this moment, in the chilled room behind oak and iron, you let the saints, the herbs, the doubtful relic cloth, and the low voices carry a little of the weight. The night remains locked around you, yet it feels less empty now, filled with whispered names, old remedies, and the tender human habit of asking the dark to be kind. Rain finds the keep before midnight. At first it is only a soft ticking above the stone vault, so faint you mistake it for mice behind the wall, or the old man's teeth worrying at sage. Then the sound gathers. It runs along the roof, taps the narrow window slit, spills from gutters into the yard, and begins that steady winter speech which belongs to rain on old buildings, patient, close, and impossible to argue with. The cell grows colder as the storm settles. Damp comes up from the flagstones and down from the air, meeting somewhere in your bones, your cloak, already scented with wet wool from the road, drinks more of the room until it feels less like clothing and more like a small defeated animal laid across your shoulders. The carter turns in his straw and curses softly at no one in particular. The apprentice pulls his knees under his tunic. The woman in grey shifts her bundle onto her lap to keep it from the floor, as if the stones themselves might steal through the cloth. A drop appears beneath the window slit. It fattens on the edge of stone, trembles, falls, and darkens the straw below. Then another follows, then another. The bucket in the corner receives them with a hollow plunk, though not all of them are thoughtful enough to land there. You move your foot out of a thin, creeping line of water. Roof's honest tonight, the carter mutters. Honest shows every fault. That, you think, may be the truest thing said in the cell. Rain reveals a keep better than daylight. It finds cracked mortar, warped shutters, loosened tiles, and all the places where proud stone has been pretending. In a great hall, servants would already be setting pans beneath leaks, moving rushes away from puddles, saving dry firewood, and complaining in whispers because open complaint travels upward to stewards and downward to kitchens. Here, no servant comes. The common cell manages itself. The old man asks for the driest straw near the wall. No one moves quickly, but the carter gathers a handful and pushes it toward him with one boot. It is not charity exactly, yet neither is it nothing. Medieval kindness often arrives without eye contact. Thunder stirs beyond the town, low and far, like a cart crossing a bridge in the sky. You think of the broken wheel in the yard, the broken wheel in the accusation, the way misfortune repeats its shapes until a tired mind begins arranging meaning from mud and timber. Some swear that thunder over a prison means a false oath has been spoken nearby. Others say it means warm air has quarrelled with cold, which seems more reasonable and much less satisfying. No one can quite agree whether signs are sent to guide people, or whether people invent guidance because weather will not explain itself. The apprentice whispers that lightning can sour milk, split trees, and frighten the unborn in their mothers. The woman says lightning will not trouble anyone in this room unless it has developed a taste for bad straw. The carter laughs once, almost silently. Then comes the scratching. It begins near the bucket corner quick, delicate, businesslike. Everyone knows the sound. Rats are not dramatic creatures. They do not enter like villains in a mummer's play. They arrive as residents returning from errands. One slips from a crack near the wall, no bigger than your hand but bold with hunger. Its whiskers test the air. Its eyes catch the rushlight. The apprentice reaches for his bread too late. The rat darts, seizes a crumb and vanishes. Another follows. The carter slaps the straw, missing by the width of a saint's mercy. Rent collectors, he says. The old man says rats dislike mint, ash, and the hair of a black cat, if tied in linen and tucked near a threshold. The woman asks whether he happens to be wearing a cat. He says not tonight. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on which charms keep rats away. Some swear by rue, some by blessed salt, some by a spoken curse addressed to the king of rats, politely but firmly. In your experience, rats respect only walls, dogs, and food stored higher than a man believes necessary. You remember the dog at the gatehouse, bright-eyed and dry under the arch. Perhaps it still sits there, judging your choices. Perhaps it has found a warmer doorway and a better class of criminal. The rain thickens. Water runs in threads down the inside wall, shining faintly in the rushlight. The smell of the cell changes, straw loosening, stone waking, wool souring, human breath dampening the air. It is not pleasant, but it is intimate, almost enclosing. The storm presses everyone closer to themselves. No one wastes words now. Even the old man's cough is muffled against his sleeve. Somewhere down the passage, a prisoner begins singing, not loudly, not bravely, just enough to keep company with the rain. The tune is a work song, perhaps from harvest or rowing, slowed until it becomes a lullaby with mud on its hem. After a verse, another voice joins, then stops when the jailer's keys stir faintly in the distance. The keys do not come to your door. They only answer the song from far away. A cold little reminder that even music is counted here. You close your eyes. Rain above, drip beside you, rats in the wall, thunder beyond the fields. The sounds layer themselves until the cell seems less like a chamber and more like the inside of a great dark instrument, every stone and straw playing one quiet note. Your body aches from the floor. Your stomach is no longer empty, though not full enough to dream of feasts. You taste sage at the back of your mouth and smell the doubtful relic cloth tucked in your bundle. A bell rings faintly through the storm. It is hard to tell from which chapel, or what hour, or whether the wind has bent the sound as it crossed the roofs. Still, everyone hears it. The woman touches her hidden badge. The apprentice shifts nearer the wall. The carter pulls his cloak over his ear. You breathe with the rain, slow and reluctant at first, then easier. The storm does not free you. It does not judge you. It only covers the keep, the town, the muddy road, the broken cart, the merchant's restless bed, the suspicious monk's candle, and the closed gate where the dog may or may not keep watch. For the middle hours of night, rain becomes the whole world, and inside its steady whisper, the common cell grows dimmer, wetter, and strangely softer, as if even prison stone can be worn smooth by enough patient falling water. The rain keeps its slow counsel above the vault, and you're nearly drifting when the passage outside wakes again. Not with the jailer's heavy shoes this time, nor the sleepy drag of a servant with bowls, but with a different rhythm, soft steps, a pause, the scrape of a stool, and the careful clearing of a throat by someone who believes throat clearing to be a form of authority. A candle brightens beneath the door. The hatch opens, and the face of the gatehouse clerk appears in the square of light, narrower than before, his beard damp at the tips and his eyes blinking against the cell's thick air. Behind him stands the old tallyman in his wool cap, holding another candle cupped in one hand. Between them, on a board balanced across two pegs outside the door, lie parchment scraps, a wax tablet, an inkhorn, a knife, and a little pouch of sand for drying ink. The clerk has brought his small kingdom with him black marks, sharpened quill, and the power to make a person more real by writing them down. The carter groans softly. "After supper, before sleep," says the clerk. The woman in grey says, "That is a narrow country." The clerk ignores this, perhaps because clerks are trained not to hear wit unless it is properly witnessed. He asks for the names again. The jailer has counted bodies, but now the clerk counts stories, names, villages, trades, charges, pledges, fines owed, goods held, goods missing, who says what, who denies what, who cannot remember, and who remembers too much. In a world where most people carry their lives in spoken form, the written mark has a strange weight. A neighbour's word can fade by harvest. Ink, once dry, sits like a small black stone. He begins with the carter. The carter gives his name, his parish, and the matter of a disputed load of firewood. He insists the wood was bought honestly from a widow near the East Field. The clerk asks which widow. The carter says, the short one. The clerk looks tired enough to become part of the wall. Several widows are short, he says. The carter says that may be true, but only one owns a piebald cow with a wicked eye. The clerk writes something down. Perhaps cow, perhaps nonsense. No one can quite agree whether writing catches truth or merely catches the version that stands still longest. Some swear that a false name written before a priest will blister the liar's tongue. Others say ink has no conscience and will serve any hand that pays for it. You watch the quill move and feel both possibilities at once. The apprentice is next. He rises too fast, bumps his shoulder against the wall, and says he is accused of spoiling his master's account roll. He claims rain came through the shop roof and blurred the numbers. The clerk asks whether the roof also added 3 extra shillings beside a wool purchase. The apprentice looks at his ink-stained fingers as though they may confess without him. The woman in grey gives the smallest sigh, not unkindly. There are many ways to be trapped in this world, and bad arithmetic is one of the quieter ones. The old man with the cough gives his name after 2 attempts, then gives another name when the clerk frowns, called one, baptized another. He says, "Such things happen. A man may be known by his father's trade, his village, a scar, a saint's day, or the name shouted by his mother when he steals apples." The clerk chooses one and marks the other beside it. He asks after the old man's surety. The old man says his nephew will come. The clerk asks when. The old man answers, when he hears. This is not timekeeping in a legal sense, but it is the best he has. At last the candle turns toward the woman in grey. She gives her name clearly. Her charge is not spoken at once. The tallyman leans closer. The clerk lowers his voice. And you catch only pieces market measure. Cloth length, a merchant's complaint, a counterclaim, witness from the dyer's lane. She keeps one hand on the bundle in her lap. Her pewter pilgrim badge glints once at her throat, then vanishes into shadow. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she is afraid, angry, or simply too tired to spend emotion on men with quills. Then your turn comes. You sit up, straw clinging to your sleeve. The clerk asks your name again, and it feels different in the dark, with rain overhead and all the cell listening. You say it slowly. He asks your village. You say it. He asks your errand. You repeat the cousin near the quay, the hope for work, the road from the ridge. He asks whether you passed a broken cart. Yes. Whether you touched it. No. Whether you saw a merchant. You saw many travellers, a drover, a woman with fish, a pilgrim with a badge, and a man asleep beside a hay wain. Whether you wore the blue hood. Yes, because winter is not impressed by innocence. The clerk writes. His quill scratches lightly, yet the sound feels sharper than the rain. You remember the merchant's tale changing from blue to green to darkish, from walking to limping, from certainty to complaint. You mention the wet shoes. The carter nods in solemn support. The clerk records something, though perhaps not the shoes. Wet shoes rarely receive the attention they deserve from justice. He asks about the clipped coin. You explain the miller, the sacks, the road. He asks whether anyone can speak for you. The cousin, perhaps, if found. The miller, if summoned. The painted saint over the gate, if saints are admitted as witnesses. The clerk does not smile, but the old tallyman does, just enough to wrinkle one eye. Beside the door, the candle gutters, the clerk sands the ink, taps the parchment, and rolls it with care. That little roll now holds your night more firmly than your own memory does. It carries your hood, your village, your uncertain cousin, your wet shoes, your clipped coin, and your denial, all tied in a strip of cord. In the morning, men may look at it and feel wiser. Before the hatch closes, the clerk says the merchant will be brought after prime if the rain does not flood the lower lane. He says it as if weather itself has entered the court rolls. Perhaps it has. In winter, mud often outranks law. The hatch shuts, light narrows, then disappears. The passage steps retreat, taking ink, parchment, and authority with them. The rain remains. You lie back slowly, feeling the shape of your name still hanging in the air. Around you, the others settle again, each one newly folded into some written mark beyond the door. The cell grows dark, but somewhere outside, on damp parchment, black letters dry beside a candle, and you understand why people fear scribes almost as much as jailers. Keys lock bodies, ink can lock a story. After the clerk's footsteps fade, the cell becomes careful with itself. No one speaks for a while, as if the ink outside the door has written not only your names but a temporary silence over the room. Rain continues above the vault, softer now, no longer striking like thrown pebbles, but smoothing itself across the roof in a long, steady hush. The rushlight near the door has burned down to a red eye. It watches no one well. You lie on your side with your bundle beneath your cheek, facing the wall. The stone is close enough that your breath returns to you faintly damp. In the trembling dark, the mortar lines look like old paths on a faded map, one running upward toward nowhere, one turning sharply, one ending in a crack where water has gathered. You follow them with tired eyes until they begin to move in that sleepy way unmoving things sometimes do. The carter is asleep first, or pretending to be. His breathing grows deep and stubborn, like a bellows in a forge. The old man mutters between coughs, perhaps prayers, perhaps complaints to his herb charm. The apprentice stays awake longest. You know because he keeps shifting, straw whispering under him, and because fear has a sound even when it says nothing. It sounds like someone trying not to ask a question. At last he asks one. Did anyone ever get out through the old drain? The woman in grey answers without lifting her head. No, the apprentice waits. You did not ask which old drain. There is always an old drain, she says. The carter, not asleep after all, breathed through his nose in amusement. The old man says there was once a prisoner who vanished from a cell beneath the west tower, leaving only a shoe, 2 buttons, and a smell of river mud. Some swear he crawled through a drain no wider than a loaf basket. Others swear the jailer sold him out through the postern gate. A third version, the old man says, involves the devil. Because every good tale eventually hires him for night work when ordinary explanations grow tired. No one can quite agree whether the man truly vanished or was simply moved before dawn by officers who preferred not to discuss their business. Yet the story remains. It lives in the cracks, in the bucket corner, in the whisper of water under the stones. You listen with half your mind, while the other half begins sinking downward into sleep. The apprentice asks whether the West Tower is near this room. The woman says no. The carter says yes. The old man says it used to be, which is not helpful in a stone keep that has not walked anywhere. Medieval directions, you decide, are less about distance and more about confidence. Your eyes close. You do not fall asleep cleanly. You drift, return, drift again. The cell does not let you go at once. The drip near the window becomes the slow step of a monk in the passage. The rain becomes whispers in a chapel. The carter's breathing becomes a hoarse-blowing mist at the gate. Somewhere in the soft confusion, you see the painted saint above the town entrance bend down from his niche and inspect your blue hood with mild disappointment. You try to explain wet shoes, but saints in dreams are rarely interested in footwear. You wake with your hand on your bundle, fingers tight in the cord. The room is darker. The rushlight has gone out, leaving only a faint grey suggestion of the window slit and the lower glow beneath the door from some candle in the passage. A rat scratches once, then thinks better of it. The woman's pilgrim badge gives a tiny sound against her cloak, metal touching metal. You hear the old man breathing, hear the apprentice whispering numbers under his breath, as if counting can build a fence around fear. The old man speaks again, though perhaps only because sleep has loosened his tongue. He tells of a mason shut up here after a quarrel over unpaid wages. The mason, he says, carved a mark into the wall with a nail, not his name, but a little tower, 3 stones high, because he wanted the keep to remember he had helped raise it. In the morning, the mark was there, but the mason was gone to judgment, fine or grave. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Prison stories are like rushes on a floor. New ones are laid over old ones, and no one knows what lies at the bottom unless the smell becomes unbearable. You open your eyes and search the wall. For a while you see nothing. Then, near your shoulder, beneath a smear of damp, you notice scratches. They may be a tower. They may be tally marks. They may be the work of a bored man with a nail and too many hours. You touch them lightly. The grooves are shallow, cold, and real. A strange comfort comes from that. Someone else has lain here. Someone else has counted bells, guarded bread, listened to rats, wondered what morning would decide. The night feels less like a trap built only for you, and more like a worn cloak passed down through unlucky hands. Not a pleasant cloak, not one you would choose, but human, at least. Sleep gathers again. This time you dream of the market toll. The clerk's table floats in rainwater. The clipped coin grows enormous, blackened and bright at once, spinning like a mill wheel. The merchant stands beside his broken cart, but his hood is blue, then green, then darkish, and every time you ask him to choose, he points at your feet. The suspicious monk appears with an onion hung from his belt, and tells you solemnly that rosemary prevents quarrels, except in courts, marriages, kitchens, and most rooms containing people. You almost laugh yourself awake. When your eyes open, the cell is quiet but for breathing. The apprentice has finally slept, curled like a comma against the wall. The carter's cloak has slipped from one shoulder. The woman in grey sits awake, or perhaps dreams with her eyes open, her hand resting on the bundle in her lap. In the darkness, she seems less like a fellow prisoner and more like one of those carved figures on church tombs, waiting with calm patience for a trumpet that is in no hurry. You turn back toward the wall. The scratches under your fingers remain. Rain softens overhead. The cell holds its damp warmth of bodies and straw. Somewhere beyond stone, the clerk's ink dries. The jailer's red thread rests against his wrist. The dog dreams under the gatehouse arch, and the bell waits in its tower for the cold hour before dawn. You hover between waking and sleep, not free, not condemned, only held, while prison legends breathe beside you like old men by a low fire. The coldest hour comes without footsteps. It enters first through the window slit, thin and pale, long before any true light follows. It creeps over the straw, under cloaks, around ankles, into the hollow places between ribs and thought. The rain has thinned to a misting whisper, but the wet it left behind remains everywhere in the darkened rushes, in the wool at your shoulder, in the mortar seams, in the breath of every sleeping body. You wake because your hand has gone numb beneath your cheek, and because prison stone, patient all night, has finally learned your bones by name. For a moment you do not remember where you are. You know only damp straw, sour wool, the taste of sage still faint on your tongue, and a darkness that has softened from black into deep grey. Then the scratches in the wall meet your fingers the little tower, or tally, or old bored wound made by some prisoner before you. The night returns around you, the common cell, the blue hood folded near your bundle, the clerk's ink, the merchant's uncertain colour, the door, the keys. The carter sleeps with his mouth open, breathing like a tired ox in a byre. The apprentice is tucked tightly into himself, knees near chin, one hand closed around nothing. The old man has pulled a corner of blanket over his head, leaving only his beard visible, pale as a cobweb. The woman in grey is awake. You can tell from the small shift of her head as you move. She sits with her bundle still held against her middle, as if the night has not persuaded her to trust the floor. Then the chapel bell sounds. It is not loud at first. The keep is thick, the hour is heavy, and the bell begins with a low bronze trembling, as if someone has woken it reluctantly. One stroke, then another, then another. The sound travels downward through the stones, through the passage, through the oak door, into the cell, and finally into your chest. It is the bell before dawn, the bell that calls monks from blankets, kitchen hands from benches, bakers to their ovens, watchmen to their last stamping turn along the wall. It is the bell that tells prisoners they have survived enough night to begin fearing the day. The old man stirs at the third stroke and crosses himself under the blanket. The apprentice wakes with a small gasp, as if the bell has pulled him out of deep water. The carter mutters something about oxen, then opens one eye and remembers he owns none at present. The woman touches her hidden pewter badge. Some swear that prayers made at the first bell before dawn travel faster, because the air has not yet been crowded by the words of the day. Others say sleepy saints are like sleepy men, and should not be troubled too early unless the matter is grave. No one can quite agree whether heaven keeps office hours, but everyone in the cell becomes a little more pious while the bell is still ringing. You sit up slowly. Your back protests. Straw clings to your cloak and hair. Across the floor, the line of water from the night's leak has become a dark vein, winding toward the bucket. Somewhere beyond the door, the keep begins to answer the bell. A latch lifts, a shoe scuffs. Someone coughs in the passage. Farther away, you hear a wooden pail set down, then the soft clatter of a servant gathering last night's candle stubs. The half-burned candle from the jailer's round, or one very like it, must be out there somewhere, shortened into a crooked stump, waiting to be melted with all the other remains of darkness. The smell changes too. At first it is still the cell's sour night breath. Then, faintly, smoke from the kitchen hearth comes alive. Damp wood catches badly, sighing and spitting before it agrees to burn. A little later comes the smell of oats, or barley, or yesterday's pottage thinned for morning. It reaches you through stone and oak as a promise so modest it almost hurts. The hatch does not open yet. Morning in a prison moves by order, not hunger. Before food, there are counts. Before counts, there are keys. Before keys, there are men deciding whether the weather has made them merciful or merely late. Down the passage, the jailer's ring stirs, not the full marching music of his rounds, only a lift and settle, iron waking iron. A voice grumbles. Another answers. The old tallyman, perhaps, with his onion against foul air and his notched stick for loaves, cups, and bodies. You imagine him rubbing sleep from his eyes, counting the marks by candle, deciding how much bread the common cell deserves, and how much the kitchen will pretend it never received. The carter sits up and rubs his face with both hands. "Coldest hour," he says. The old man emerges from the blanket. Always is. Why? Because the son is still considering whether to bother. The apprentice gives a small laugh, thin but real. It disappears quickly in the cold, but it is enough. You flex your fingers, blow into them, and tuck them under your arms. In village houses, people might warm stones by the hearth at night and wrap them in cloth for the bed. Some place a pan of coals beneath the sheets, carefully, unless they wish to become a cautionary tale. Here, warmth is shared by accident shoulders near shoulders, breath in a low room. Wool blankets that have served too many masters to be proud. The woman in grey unties her bundle at last and removes a strip of linen. She wraps it around her right wrist, pulling it snug with her teeth. The apprentice asks whether she is hurt. She says no, it is against trembling. Her grandmother taught her to bind the pulse before judgment, to keep fear from running too freely through the hand. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things soothe the blood or only give the fingers something to do. Either way, her hand steadies. The bell stops. Its silence is almost louder. For a few breaths, no one moves. Outside the window slit, the blackness has softened toward the colour of ash. You cannot see the yard, but you can sense it waking horses shifting in stalls, a groom cursing a frozen strap, chickens offended by moisture. The dog under the gatehouse arch rising and shaking rain from its coat. You picture the broken cartwheel leaning on its blocks, wet and innocent in the yard, while another broken wheel waits in the merchant's complaint like a trap made of wood and memory. Footsteps approach. The key enters the outer lock of the passage door, then another nearer lock, then yours. The bolts are not drawn yet, only tested. The jailer is making sure the night has kept its promises. The oak door trembles once under his hand. 6 he calls. The carter answers, 6 and hungry. Hungry counts, the jailer says. The hatch opens just enough for his candle to peer in, though dawn is beginning to make candles look embarrassed. He counts faces, carter, old man, apprentice, woman, far blanket shape, you. His red thread hangs damp at his wrist. He looks at the straw, the bucket, the leak, your blue hood, and the old man's cough. Then he shuts the hatch again. The cell exhales into grey. You're still locked in, still waiting for the merchant, the clerk, the court, and whatever version of truth can survive a medieval morning. But the night has loosened. The bell has named the hour. The keep is stirring around you, slow and reluctant, and though no sunlight enters yet, something has changed. The darkness no longer feels endless. It has become a room with an edge. Grey light arrives not as a beam, not as a kindness, but as a slow washing of the dark from the stones. It gathers first at the window slit, a narrow ash-coloured line high above your head, then spreads down the wall until the scratches beside your shoulder show themselves clearly. In daylight, the old mark looks less like a tower, and more like 3 crooked cuts made by a bored hand. Still, you keep the tower in your mind. A tower is a better companion than a scratch. The cell reveals itself by degrees, and morning is not flattering. Night had softened everything. Dawn is practical. It shows the straw flattened into yellow-brown mats, the rushes blackened where feet have ground them into damp, the bucket glistening in its corner, the drip mark shining below the window, and the soot gathered on the ceiling stones like a low winter cloud. It shows faces too. The carter has a crease of straw pressed across one cheek. The apprentice looks younger by daylight, which is unfortunate for a man accused by ink. The old man's beard points in several directions. The woman in grey looks exactly as she did in darkness, tired, guarded, and quietly awake. You look down at yourself. Your cloak is creased, your hands are dirty, and a strand of straw clings to your sleeve like a bad reputation. Your blue hood lies beside your bundle. dull and innocent in the grey light. It is hard to believe a piece of wool can cause so much official interest. But men have quarrelled over smaller things: a boundary stone, a goose, a missing measure of ale, a look held too long across a market stall. Medieval justice, like medieval soup, can contain surprising fragments. The hatch opens with a scrape, and the jailer's voice enters before his face. Bowls. Everyone moves, slowly, stiffly, but with a practiced order. The carter gathers the wooden bowls from where they were left in the dark. The apprentice wipes one with the edge of his tunic, then remembers the tunic is not cleaner than the bowl and gives up. The old man folds his blanket into a square that pretends to be neat. The woman in grey reties her bundle and slips the pilgrim badge deeper beneath her collar. You smooth your hood, though no one has asked you to present it like evidence. The jailer opens the hatch wider. Pale morning behind him makes his candle unnecessary, and he has none now. Without flame, he looks more human, and less like a servant of keys. His red thread still circles his wrist, damp and faded. Behind him, the old tallyman waits with a tray and a notch stick, marking the morning count: 6 bowls out, 6 bowls back, 6 bodies breathing. In many households, morning begins with milking, sweeping, stirring porridge, opening shutters, carrying ashes, and scolding children into shoes. Here, morning begins with wood, iron, and numbers. A lad from the kitchen pushes in breakfast thin ale, a crust each, and a scoop of warm barley so loose it might be called broth by a charitable monk. You take yours with both hands. The bowl is barely warm, but barely warm is still a miracle after stone. You drink first, letting the ale loosen your dry throat. Small ale is safer than much water in many towns, or so people say, though no one can quite agree whether it is the boiling, the brewing, or the simple comfort of ale that saves a stomach from regret. Either way, it tastes faintly sour and deeply welcome. The carter eats quickly, then uses his thumb to chase the last grains around the bowl. The apprentice nibbles as if his thoughts have filled him more than food could. The old man crumbles his crust into the barley to soften it for his teeth. The woman waits until everyone else has started before she eats, one hand still keeping her bundle close. The far blanket shape, now revealed as a narrow man with hair like tangled flax, sits up at last and drinks his ale without speaking. Daylight makes confinement strangely ordinary. That is perhaps the most unsettling thing. The terror of night has not vanished, but it has put on shoes and begun its chores. Someone asks for the bucket to be moved nearer the door. Someone shakes out a blanket, sending up dust and the sharp, dry smell of old wool. The carter picks straw from his hair. The apprentice licks his finger and tries to rub ink from his nail, as if one clean nail might persuade a clerk of virtue. You fold your spare stocking back into your bundle and check that the doubtful relic cloth remains inside. It does. The old man asks whether anyone has a comb. No one does. He says a comb made of boxwood keeps away headaches if drawn 3 times through the hair before sunrise. The woman says it also keeps away lice if actually used, which may be the stronger magic. Some swear that washing the face in water caught from the first rain of morning clears lies from the eyes. The apprentice asks whether last night's leak counts. The carter says if it does, the whole cell should soon become painfully honest. A little laughter moves through the room, warmer than the barley. You notice frost now, faint along the edge of the window slit where the cold has silvered the stone. Beyond it, the yard must be pale and muddy, horses steaming, carts dripping, servants carrying pails with bent shoulders. Somewhere, the suspicious monk may be leaving chapel, his hem wet, his mind full of other people's sins. Somewhere, the merchant from the bridge is waking to his own anger, perhaps remembering blue, perhaps green, perhaps darkish. You try not to follow that thought too far. This part of morning belongs only to the cell, to bowls and straw and faces slowly becoming known. The jailer returns for the dishes. He does not rush. The keep is awake enough now that his authority has witnesses, and men with witnesses often move more carefully. He asks whether the leak worsened. The carter says the roof told the truth all night. The jailer glances up, then shrugs as if roofs have always been unreliable members of staff. He tells the old tallyman to note fresh straw by noon, though whether that is promise, habit, or theatre is hard to tell. When the hatch closes again, the cell feels different, not free, not safe, but less like a nightmare and more like a poor lodging with a very strict host. You sit with your back against the wall and watch grey light settle on the others. These are no longer only shapes in darkness. They are a carter with straw on his cheek, an apprentice with frightened ink-stained fingers, an old man guarding herbs in his sleeve, a woman in grey with a hidden badge, a silent man beneath a frayed blanket, and you traveller in a blue hood, waiting while dawn makes every small thing plain. The next movement begins with keys. They come along the passage in their familiar small storm, iron striking iron, and every person in the cell looks toward the door as if pulled by one string. The jailer stops outside, speaks with the old tallyman, then slides the hatch open. Daylight behind him is stronger now, a washed winter light that turns his face pale at the edges and shows the red thread on his wrist frayed almost through. Blue hood, he says, grey cloak, carter. For a heartbeat no one moves, then the words settle. You, the woman in grey, and the carter are to be taken out, not released, not condemned, only moved onward, which in a medieval keep can feel like being carried from one uncertainty into another, with better ventilation. You gather your bundle, your fingers are clumsy from cold, and the knot resists you with the stubbornness of small objects at serious moments. The carter rises, rolling his shoulders. The woman in grey lifts her bundle from her lap and stands with a stillness that makes everyone else seem untidy. The apprentice watches you with wide eyes, as if your departure might reveal the shape of his own. The old man raises 2 fingers in blessing, then thinks better of it and offers you a piece of dried sage instead. For the tongue, he whispers, keeps it wise. You tuck the bitter leaf into your sleeve because refusing a prison gift feels unlucky. Some swear sage sharpens speech before judgment, while others say it only makes the mouth taste like a garden that has given up. No one can quite agree whether herbs help truth, but they at least give the hand something to hold. The door opens. Fresh air comes in, colder and cleaner than the cell, though still carrying smoke, mud, and the old sour passage smell. You step over the threshold after the carter. Your legs feel uncertain beneath you. One night on stone has made you older by several winters. The woman follows, and the door closes behind the 3 of you, sealing the apprentice, the old man, the silent flax-haired prisoner, and the damp straw back into grey dimness. The passage seems narrower in morning. Without the deep cover of night, you see stains on the lower stones, candle smoke above the brackets, scraped marks around locks, and rushes trodden flat into brown lines. The little chapel alcove waits in the wall with its image of St. Leonard and broken chains. The beeswax taper has burned down to a soft golden lump. Someone has added a bent pin and a thread of red wool to the ledge since you passed last evening. Perhaps a prisoner's wife came before dawn. Perhaps the suspicious monk left it. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about offerings made in prisons. Half are faith, half are bargains, and the rest are habit-wearing holy clothes. You touch 2 fingers to your forehead as you pass. The carter does too, quickly. The woman in grey does not, but her hand rests briefly over the hidden pilgrim badge beneath her cloak. At the passage table, the old tallyman makes marks on his stick. 3 out. The jailer says your names, or the names by which the keep currently knows you. The tallyman nods. His onion still hangs from the peg, softer now, its cloves dark and swollen. It has spent the night fighting foul air and appears to have lost with dignity. The keep door opens, and morning enters all at once. The yard is wet, silvered by rain, and full of life pretending not to notice prisoners. Servants cross with pails, heads down, skirts and tunics lifted from mud. A groom leads a steaming horse from the stable, its hooves striking puddles with delicate annoyance. Chickens scratch near a dung heap as if searching for legal wisdom. 2 pigs nose along a fence, confident creatures, interested in everything and responsible for nothing. A black cat sits under a cart and washes one paw with the calm of a judge who has already decided the world is foolish. The broken cart wheel still leans on blocks near the wall. Rain has darkened the wood. You try not to look at it too long, but the sight hooks you. Wheel, purse, blue hood, wet shoes. The carter notices your glance and mutters, "Every yard has a broken wheel. Only fools build charges out of them." The jailer hears but does not answer. Perhaps he agrees. Perhaps he's saving his opinion for warmer weather. A monk crosses from the chapel porch with his hood up, sandals dark with mud. It is the same narrow-faced monk from last night, or one who has borrowed his air of knowing too much. He carries a small book against his chest and walks carefully around puddles. When he sees you, his eyes rest on your face, then your hood, then your hands. He lifts 2 fingers again, the same brief blessing. You wonder whether he blesses everyone who passes toward judgment, or only those who look particularly unprepared for it. Medieval courtesy can be hard to separate from warning. Beyond the inner gate, the town is waking. You hear it before you see it: cartwheels grinding over whetstones, a baker calling to a boy, geese complaining with impressive commitment, a hammer striking metal in a smithy. And from farther downhill, the first thin cries of merchants arranging stalls. Market day continues where the one traveller has slept behind oak. Bread must be sold, fish must be salted, tolls must be argued, and everyone must pretend the weather is unusual. You are led across the yard toward a low hall beside the keep, where manor business and town complaints are heard when they are too small for royal thunder and too large for kitchen gossip. A servant shakes fresh rushes inside the doorway. Another carries a brazier, its coals glowing beneath ash. The smell of smoke and wet wool returns, but this time it is mixed with warm bread from somewhere nearby, which feels almost cruel. At the hall steps, townsfolk have already gathered under the eaves. A woman with a basket of eggs, a man holding a length of dyed cloth, 2 drovers whispering over a fine, a boy clutching a goose by the neck, the goose looking as if it has retained counsel. Near the back stands the fishwoman from the gate, her bundle smaller now, her eyes quick, and there, near a post, you see the dog from last night, damp-eared and smug, as if it has followed at a distance simply to see how the lodging was. The jailer places you beside the carter and the woman in grey, not bound, not free, waiting beneath the drip of the roof. Your blue hood hangs over your arm, the sage leaf presses lightly against your sleeve. The bell that woke you before dawn is silent now, but you still feel its bronze note somewhere inside your ribs. The hall door opens wider, warmth spills out, along with voices, ink, and the smell of fresh rushes. Judgment, or something close to it, is beginning its morning work. You stand beneath the dripping eaves while the hall wakes into judgment. Rainwater falls from the roof in slow beads, striking the mud beside your boots, and each drop seems to count the moments more honestly than any clerk. The dog sits near the post with its tail curled around its paws, watching the gathered townsfolk with the solemn attention of a bishop at a feast. It has no case to answer, no toll to pay, and no blue hood to explain, which may be why it looks so wise. Inside the low hall, servants finish strewing fresh rushes over the stone floor. The green smell of cut stems rises through the damp air, mixed with wood smoke from the brazier and the warmer scent of bread somewhere beyond a side door. A boy carries in a jug of ale and nearly trips over the threshold, saving the jug but sacrificing his dignity. No one laughs loudly. Manor courts are not famous for rewarding cheerful noise before breakfast. The jailer leads you in with the carter and the woman in grey. You do not enter like criminals from a dark tale, dragged in chains beneath thunder. You enter as cold, tired people carrying bundles, straw on your clothes, sleep in your eyes, and worries folded into your sleeves. Medieval justice. You're beginning to understand, often looks less like a sword and more like a damp room where too many people talk at once. At the far end sits the steward, a narrow man in a fur-lined cloak, with a cap that seems to take itself seriously. Beside him stands the clerk from last night, his parchment roll opened, his quill trimmed, his ink waiting in a horn. The old tallyman is there too, holding his notched stick like a small wooden memory. A reeve, 2 local men, and the suspicious monk linger near the wall. The monk's eyes are lowered, but you have the strong feeling he misses nothing, not even the dog sneaking in behind the crowd. Your name is called, it sounds strange in the steward's mouth, thinner and more official than when your mother might say it, or when a friend calls across a road. You step forward. The clerk reads the matter traveller from the ridge road. Blue hood, clipped coin, merchant's purse missing near broken cart, held for morning inquiry. His voice makes it all sound tidy. You know it was never tidy. It was mud, cold, hunger, confusion. And a clerk disappointed by your cousin's vague employment near the quay. The merchant comes next. He is wrapped in a brown cloak and wears a face suitable for financial injury. He swears by St. Matthew, patron of tax collectors and other complicated souls, that his purse vanished while he tended a broken wheel. He says he saw a figure pass behind the cart. The steward asks the colour of the hood. The merchant opens his mouth, pauses, and says blue. Then he adds perhaps greenish blue, then dark, certainly dark. The carter beside you makes a sound that might be a cough if Mercy is listening. No one can quite agree whether memory sharpens under questioning or wears itself into a smoother lie. The steward does not scold the merchant, but his quill-bearing clerk raises one eyebrow, and that eyebrow feels almost like a small legal victory. You're asked to speak. The sage leaf tucked in your sleeve has gone dry and brittle. You touch it once with your thumb and tell the truth as plainly as you can. You came by the ridge road. You passed a broken cart, yes, but did not stop. Your shoes were wet, which explains any limp. Your hood is blue because the world is cold and you own no better one. The clipped coin came from a miller after work carrying sacks. Your cousin may be near the quay, though barrels, rope, or fish remain possibilities. This last part does not strengthen your case, but truth has its own awkward shape. The fishwoman from the gate steps forward then, smelling faintly of smoke and river salt. She says she saw you in the toll line after dusk, and before that on the road, and you walked normally until the mud near the gate where anyone with mortal feet might stumble. She also says the merchant's cart stood by the alder stump before you passed. This matters. The clerk writes quickly. The merchant frowns as if time itself has taken sides. Then the pilgrim with the dented badge speaks from the back. He remembers a man near the broken cart wearing a hood. Yes, but says the hood was not blue. It was black, or very dark brown, or perhaps simply wet. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about wet cloth, he adds, because wet cloth is a liar under poor light. The steward looks at him for a long moment, then asks whether he saw the man's face. The pilgrim says no, only that the fellow moved quickly toward the river path. A washerwoman is mentioned. She cannot come because the lower lane is flooded, but another woman says the washerwoman told her she saw something thrown near the reeds. The steward dislikes hearsay, but the monk murmurs that flooded lanes delay many kinds of truth. You're not sure whether this helps. Monks have a gift for sounding useful while remaining safely foggy. The clipped coin is brought out. The steward turns it between finger and thumb. Coin clipping can bring heavy trouble, but the coin is old, worn, and hardly rich enough to inspire a royal sermon. The reeve says many such coins pass at the mill. The steward orders it kept aside until the miller can answer, then looks at you as if deciding whether you are a thief, a fool, or merely poor. In a medieval court, poverty often arrives wearing all 3 masks. The carter's matter follows briefly. His widow with the piebald cow is found in the crowd, and she confirms the wood was sold, though she argues he still owes for carting. The steward finds him lightly, in coin or work. The carter bows, relieved and annoyed together. The woman in grey speaks about the cloth measure with steady force. producing from her bundle a marked cord used by the dyer's lane. Some swear such cord should be knotted under a saint's image overnight to keep merchants honest. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the cord's holiness matters, but its measurements do. Her accuser mutters. The steward orders a smaller fine for both sides, and the woman's mouth tightens into something that is not quite gratitude. Then your matter returns. The steward confers with the clerk, the reeve, and the monk. The hall murmurs, outside. Mud sucks at passing boots. The dog scratches behind one ear and appears to consider the entire institution of law excessive. At last. The steward says you're to be released on pledge until the merchant's true thief is sought along the river path. Your bread knife is to be returned. Your coins, except the clipped one, are restored. You must remain in town until noon. Answer, if called. And pay a small fee for the night's keeping. A fee for being wrongly held feels like a joke told by someone with authority and no wish to hear laughter. Still, it is not the worst ending. You pay with 2 small coins, and the clerk marks it down. Ink locks the story again, but this time the lock opens outward. The jailer returns your bread knife, handle first. His red thread has finally broken and hangs loose from his wrist. Wet shoes, he says. Wet shoes, you answer. He almost smiles. You step from the hall into the yard, where the rain has stopped and the mud shines under a pale strip of morning sun. Your blue hood is back on your shoulders. Your bundle is lighter by a little bread, your purse lighter by the fee, and your heart lighter by more than you expected. Behind you, the hall continues its work, fines, witnesses, geese, cloth measures, old grudges, and practical mercy moving slowly through smoke and rushes. You stand in the yard with the pale morning sun resting weakly on your shoulders, and for a moment you do not move. Freedom, when it arrives after one locked night, does not feel like trumpets or open fields. It feels like cold air entering your sleeves, mud waiting for your boots, and the odd fact that no one is currently telling you where to stand. The keep remains behind you, broad and wet, its stones darkened by rain, its windows narrow as suspicious eyes. Somewhere inside. The common cell still holds the apprentice, the old man, the flax-haired sleeper, and the damp straw where your body left a hollow. The jailer has already turned away. His keys answer him at his hip, that little iron weather you know too well. The broken red thread at his wrist trails like a defeated charm. Some swear that a protection thread must be burned once it breaks, or the bad luck it trapped may find its owner again. Others tie the pieces to a thorn bush outside town and let the wind take the trouble elsewhere. No one can quite agree whether luck can be moved like laundry. But the jailer seems ready to test any custom that does not require paperwork. You tuck your bread knife into your bundle, handle wrapped in cloth, blade safely hidden. Your coins sit in your pouch, fewer than before. Your clipped coin remains with the steward's clerk, lying perhaps beside wax tablets, sand, and other small mysteries of administration. You wonder if the miller will ever be asked about it, and whether he will remember paying you, or whether he will shrug and say all coins look alike when grain dust fills the air. The dog trots toward you from beneath the hall steps, tail low but hopeful. It sniffs your boot, gives your blue hood a careful inspection, and then sneezes. You choose to take this as absolution. From the chapel porch, the narrow-faced monk emerges once more, carrying his small book. He pauses when he sees you still standing there, neither prisoner nor guest. His eyes go to the hood, then to the mud on your shoes, then to your face. Roads improve by walking, he says. It sounds like wisdom, or perhaps something monks say when they do not want to discuss legal fees. You nod anyway. He lifts 2 fingers in blessing, the 3rd time now, and this time you accept it without wondering whether it is warning or habit. In the keep yard, you learn to take small mercies in whatever wrapping they come. You spend the hours until noon close to the market square, as ordered. The town feels larger now that you're not being escorted through it. Merchants raise awnings still wet from rain. A woman spreads coarse linen across a board and weights the corners with stones. A baker sells brown loaves from a basket lined with cloth. each loaf smelling so warm and honest that your stomach nearly petitions the court on its own behalf. You buy one small roll with a coin you resent spending and eat it slowly under the eaves of a shuttered shop. Nearby, the fishwoman from the toll line arranges smoked eels, salted herring, and river fish with cloudy eyes. When she sees you, she gives a short nod. It is not friendship, but it is witness, and witness has mattered enough today to feel like kinship. The pilgrim with the dented badge passes carrying a staff and a pouch of bread, already telling someone that wet cloth lies under poor light. By sunset, you suspect the tale will grow, by next market day. The thief may wear a hood of every colour known to dyers, limp on both feet, and vanish through a drain no wider than a spoon. At noon, no one calls you back. The bell marks the hour from the chapel tower, its cracked bronze voice spreading over roofs, stalls, puddles, and the muddy yard of the keep. You wait through the last note. You wait a little longer because freedom can be difficult to trust when it has been written by clerks. Then you begin walking toward the gate. The town has entered its afternoon rhythm. A cooper hammers hoops round a barrel. A girl carries rushes in a bundle taller than herself. An alewife chalks marks by her door, keeping debts in white lines that may be more feared than prison ink. A man at a roadside shrine touches a pilgrim badge to the painted foot of a saint, then presses the same badge to his aching knee. Some swear pewter warmed by devotion can soothe joint pain. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the metal, the prayer, or the pause from walking does the true healing. You pass the toll table where it began. The clerk is not there, only a younger boy stacking weights and pretending not to stare at you. Above the gate, the painted saint looks down from his niche, rain-worn and patient. This time, you tap the post beneath him with your left knuckle. Then, after considering the day you have had, you tap it with your right as well. Medieval caution is mostly repetition with better posture. The gate opens toward the road. Beyond it, the fields lie washed clean by rain, furrows shining, hedges dark, the river mist beginning again in low white threads. The dog slips out beside you as if it has business beyond the wall. For a few dozen steps, it follows, nose to the ground, then stops at a fork where the road bends toward a farmstead. It looks back once. You bow slightly, because the dog has shown more consistency than the merchant, and then it trots away. Evening gathers as you leave the town behind. Your cloak still smells of wet wool, smoke, and the cell's sour straw, though the open air begins slowly to loosen those memories from the cloth. You cross a field path where frost waits in the shadows, and crows settle along the bare branches. Behind you, the keep grows smaller on its mound. Its walls, so heavy in the night, now look almost gentle from a distance, as if no keys hang inside, as if no one is waiting for supper through a hatch, as if ink and iron have not spent centuries teaching people patience. You walk until the road rises slightly and the town bell rings for dusk. The sound reaches you softer than before, no longer passing through stone, but through air, mist, and the long brown grass beside the ditch. You stop there. You turn back, in the fading light. You remember the common cell breathing open, the carter's quiet jokes, the old man's bitter sage, the woman's hidden pilgrim badge, the apprentice counting in darkness, the jailer tapping oak so the wood remembers, the clerk sanding ink beside the door, the rain making one great whisper of the whole keep. You are not certain what truly happened to the merchant's purse. Perhaps the washerwoman saw it sink near the reeds. Perhaps the dark-hooded thief is already miles away, warming his hands in another town. Perhaps the merchant will tell the story for years and remember you with complete confidence in details he never had. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. But you know what happened inside a medieval prison at night. You know it was not only terror, not only cruelty, not only iron. It was damp straw, thin ale, old remedies, small bargains, whispered saints, rats in the wall, jokes made carefully, and strangers sharing enough warmth to pass from one bell to the next. And now the road opens before you, quiet and dim. The last light rests low behind the fields, and the world begins to soften at its edges. You pull your cloak closer, not in fear now, but in the familiar comfort of wool against the evening chill. The mud beneath your boots is still deep, yet it releases you step by step. A thin trail of smoke rises from a cottage chimney beyond the hedgerow, and somewhere a cowbell answers the chapel bell in a smaller, earthier voice. You keep walking slower now. The keep fades into the blue-grey distance until it is only a darker shape against the hill. The gate, the hall, the passage, the cell, the hatch, the cold stones, each one grows quieter inside you. The half-burned candle becomes only a glow. The iron keys become only a faint chime. The rain becomes a soft hush, remembered more than heard. There is bread in your bundle, a dry road ahead, and the evening star beginning to show above the black branches. You breathe in the clean, damp air. You breathe out the long night behind you. Nothing hurries. Nothing calls you back. The old world settles around you with its bells, its mud, its smoky roofs, its saints in rain-worn niches, and its small, stubborn kindnesses. So you walk on gently, wrapped in the deepening dusk, while the last warmth of day slips down behind the fields. The road grows quiet. The sky grows darker. The medieval town closes its gate far behind you, and its sounds fade into the soft distance until only your footsteps remain, slow and steady, carrying you onward into sleep.